go straight to Toby. What does this mean, trial in absentia? How do you try someone when they're not even in the country?
Well, ordinarily, and even under the ICT Act, there is provision to try a person in their absence if they abscond, if they flee the jurisdiction, and if they try to hide. We've already seen one trial with Assad tried in his absence because he was unavailable to the authorities. So there is provision for that. International tribunals generally do not try people in their absence, with the exception of the Special Tribunal for Lebanon. That tribunal has provision for trials in absentia because of the particular problems they face. The situation with Chowdhury Muin-ud-Din and his co-accused Ashraf Zaman Khan.
This is the gentleman in New York.
That's correct. He's a US citizen and Chowdhury Muin-ud-Din is a British citizen. The situation with these two individuals is that these are not individuals who have absconded, they're not in hiding, and they haven't fled the jurisdiction to evade prosecution.
They've also not said we'll come and we'll face trial, have they?
They haven't, but the charges have never been put to them. There's never been any formal request for them to stand trial. This is one of the issues that we've repeatedly raised, that you cannot consider them to be to have fled the jurisdiction unless a formal request is made for them to return, either voluntarily or through an extradition process. Not once has there been any formal request from the Bangladesh authorities for mutual assistance, to put these matters to Mr. Muin-ud-Din, or to even formally request him to stand trial.
So the court is just going to go ahead and just try these people without actually formally inviting them to come and stand trial?
That's as we understand it. The information, it's rather difficult because we have to, as you, only rely on what we read in the media because no official documents have been sent to us. It is slightly unsettling that during a recent visit by the Foreign Minister, Dr. Dipu Moni here, where there was a lot of noise made about making an extradition request, and the United Kingdom should hand over a person who's wanted for such grave crimes.
The UK probably wouldn't do that because the death penalty might be involved here, right?
Well, that's right, and Dipu Moni had actually referred to that as a potential barrier, but said that there is still an obligation to return people for crimes of this kind.
Let me just bring Fuad into this. The court has appointed lawyers for these gentlemen. They don't get to choose their own defence lawyers. Is that fair?
Before I answer that question, perhaps if I can add to what my learned friend said, is perhaps the government had made some adverts on the different newspapers. Is it perhaps Toby might be aware of it?
Adverts in newspapers?
Yes, on different newspapers, saying that Mr. Khan and Mr. ud-Din, making them a request that if you're in hiding, you must come back and surrender to the court because there is a proceedings underway. But of course,
why in a newspaper? Surely these men are available to be listened to.
What the government is saying, because they do not have any particular information saying that in what address they live in, apart from the perhaps one in the UK and one in the USA, so to serve the documentations legally. That's one of the issues the government is saying. But of course, there are of course the issues of goodwill and intention as well. They don't want basically the gentleman to face any fair trial. Rather, they want to wash their hands and do whatever they did to Mr. Assad before. It's a quick proceedings and quick trial without any defense. And the government lawyers, appointed lawyers, are basically all actively involved with the ruling party politics.
And is there going to be a difference between the way they try the US citizen and the British citizen, or is it the same?
No, I mean, our understanding is that they will be jointly charged, or they have been jointly charged, and it's likely to form part of the same trial. What I would say, in addition to what Fuad has said, it is correct that, and it's quite normal procedure to advertise in local papers before taking matters any further. But what you would ordinarily expect is that an advertisement is made for a certain period of time, and then, failing any response, an extradition request is made. It may well be that the Bangladesh authorities do not have Mr. Muin-ud-Din's address. I would be very surprised for them to say that they don't know who his lawyer is, and they certainly know where I reside or where my professional address is. So if they really wanted to request his voluntary return, they've had plenty of opportunity. With Mr. Ashraf Zaman Khan, we read in the Bangladeshi media just a few days ago that one of the chief investigators was in New York conducting an investigation. So it's not as if they don't know where he is, and they've made no extradition request through the US authorities as well.
What's stopping you, Toby, from just taking your client and saying, come on, let's go and let's do this the proper way? We know that they want you there, so why don't we just go and do it?
Well, we've always said that any extradition request would be resisted because he has been quite clear in stating that he's quite prepared to stand trial before a tribunal which is fair, impartial and independent. This is neither of the above. So there's nothing compelling him to return, but the point is no attempts have been made to put these questions to him or to request that he returns. We know by inference why they're not seeking his extradition, because many of the discussions already took place through Skypegate, and we know that Dr. Ziauddin discussed these matters with the previous chairman who had to step down.
Yeah.
They'd already discussed that we can't sentence Mr. Mu'nuddin to death because we'll never get him back from the United Kingdom. So we'll just sentence him to 100 years in prison. And that was part of their discussion. But the government of Bangladesh also knows that any extradition process is going to take a very long time. You only have to look at the example of Abu Qatada, which has taken 7 years, and that process has only been concluded by his agreement to voluntarily return to Jordan to stand trial. We have a previous example of a case that I worked on concerning the former Vice President of Bosnia. I mean, that process took over a year. So it's unlikely, even if the UK was willing to entertain an extradition request, and even if a district judge sitting as an extradition judge agreed to order extradition, which is highly unlikely for a number of reasons, but even if that process was agreed to and the Secretary of State sanctioned his return, that's going to take at least a year, maybe even longer. So the government knows that they're not going to be able to finish this before the end of their current mandate, and so that is clearly why they're going to try them both in their absence to have a sensationalist victory, which they can then use.
The process, the extradition process, is likely to take a long time, but the case itself is likely to be very quick and fast. Fuad, is that right? And what would happen if Chowdhury Mu'nuddin is found guilty? Then what happens after that?
As things happen to other detainees, the fact of the matter is that, as Mel and friend said, and also that Skype scandal had cleared that perhaps there is a possibility that they might be able to take Mr. Khan back from the USA, because if you viewers remember that there was an alleged individual in the murder case of the founding father who has been extradited back to Bangladesh. So that's a positive example for Mr. Khan, and that's the reason basically why one of the prosecutors, as Toby was referring to, was in the USA to look into the matter. But of course, what I understood, that they're not going to even try for Mr. Uddin to take him back, because they know for sure that it's going to work, as it happened to one of the alleged of the Mujib's murder in Canada. And for successive years, the Canadian government has refused to hand him over because of the death penalty issue. Yes. So I think it's not going to happen to Mr. Uddin in any way. That's what I understood. And of course, you can, if you look back to the way the trial has been proceedings, it has been a bit of slowed down recently since the ruling party's defeat in the local elections. And also there is a appellate matters for 60 days matter. That limit has crossed for both Mr. Saidi and Mr. Mullah. And the government has slowed down a bit of, and the judiciary is also taking the matters into consideration. So well, I do not think there's anything happening shortly in any of the matters.
Yeah, well, we've actually run out of time. It'd be great to continue this conversation, but that is all we have time for tonight. I want to thank my guests before we leave, Toby Cadman and Assad Zaman Fuad, for joining us. And thank you at home for watching. Remember, you can keep up with our Twitter conversation on Bangladesh by using the hashtag #BangladeshInCrisis, and you can view previous episodes of our series by visiting our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Islam Channel TV. We're back on Tuesday with a special report on ethical fashion, which looks into the recent factory collapse. So join us for that on Tuesday. But until then, from all of us here, Assalamu alaikum. you.